looks very regal. Like behind you, you have a, yeah.
Yeah.
Like there should be a family crest behind you or something.
Yeah, there we go. Well, I've actually got a Crown Royal tuxedo I could put on made out of crown bags if that would make the podcast more interesting.
That sounds kind of awesome, actually.
What Etsy shop did you get that off of?
Yeah.
You know what? We had a limousine for years and years, so we kept all these crown bags from many nights out, and then I had my mom sew all the bags on a tuxedo.
That's awesome.
So yeah, it makes you visible to women under the age of 30 again.
Yeah,
so that's neat. It's got magic powers.
Yeah, this is a great way to introduce today's podcast guest.
He's got one unique thing that I don't think any of the other listeners have. He has a Crown Royal tuxedo.
When you see a guy show up in a Crown Royal tuxedo, you know this guy came to play. Yeah, he came.
There you go.
Exactly right. He means business. I like it.
So,
All right, guys.
So Tim, thank you for being on the podcast today. Steve and I are really excited to have you on. A friend of ours, Dan, over at the Rental Income Podcast, recommended you. I said you were a great guest. And I got a chance to listen to that podcast and also heard you on Bigger Pockets. Really interesting story. And we want to thank you for being on the show today.
Thanks for having me, Eric. Thanks for having me, Steve.
So, Tim, if you can give a little bit of backstory, what is your story in real estate? How did you get started? And kind of just let our listeners know a little bit more about you.
Sure. There's a million guys that have done better than me, a million guys done worse. So my goal was to own a house before I turned 20 years old. And I was just really hell-bent on doing that. And I was fortunate that I did it in 19 and 10 months. And that really got me going in real estate. And there's very few things in life that are going to allow you to put a little bit of money down. The bank puts the vast majority of the money down, and you get to keep all the upside. But we were talking off air a little bit. We all have to start out somewhere, and most people start out with something affordable in the rental world. Mm-hmm. And that can sometimes make or break you. Steve, like you were saying, you had a buddy that had such a tough time with a low-end property that now he's done. He's out of the real estate business. So when I talk about some of the higher end stuff I'm doing now or have done, please don't misconstrue it as I think, it's the only way to go. We were joking, if you can't drive a Mercedes, don't drive anything at all. I'm not that guy at all. I started out very, very modestly. I've made money on the modest stuff. It's just I'm to the point where appreciation means more, school district means more, renters that have a 750, 800 credit score means more to me at 51 than when I was at 19 and had my first rent house. I would take anyone. It was a little 2-bedroom, 1-bath, 1-car garage. So I've kind of seen a lot, and I really park myself in the higher end rental property, the Class A properties. And I think that's what kind of drew you guys to have me on today. And thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So the one question I've got on the higher end properties, especially from, coming from a background check company, we hear a lot of horror stories, but are usually based around non-payment. I imagine that's probably not as much of a concern, but do you run into tenants on the higher end stuff who are just pain in the necks that just rub you the wrong way for every reason other than not paying the rent on time?
You know what? I've experienced that on the mid-range and the low end. But like you guys, I was way ahead in running credit checks because I always feel like the bad news is going to show up. Mm-hmm. So if you want to, because it's been sitting empty for 2 months and you don't want to run a check and then all of a sudden you got somebody in there, I would rather stay empty an extra month or two than have the wrong person. The wrong person is going to destroy the place. Mm-hmm. The wrong person can be very difficult to get out. So, I feel like I'm a commercial for your core business, but I'm all about background checks. We run it on everybody. And I've had lower end properties where you just didn't run background checks. And that's where 98% of my frustration has been. But to answer your question, if I had a problem with somebody that I ran a background check on, a credit check on for non-payment, I haven't, only because we've eliminated the people that potentially can be that. I mean, I'm sure it could still happen, and now I probably just cursed myself by saying that. But no, I mean, it's a core to our philosophy. I mean, some of my stuff is worth $400,000 or $500,000. I'm not going to roll the dice and stick somebody with a good story in there without running their. I mean, your credit history is a summation of every choice you've made in your life, and I want to take a look at that before I let you in one of my houses.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, and you made such a great point. I know we've mentioned it a ton on the podcast, and any landlords out there listening, if you remember one thing remember what Tim just said. It is better to have an extra month or two of vacancy than to just shove the first person in there because you're worried about having a vacant property. Take the time, get the right person, right?
I'll add one more thing that I learned through the years before. I was like, all right, I'm just going to put a sign in the front yard and take whoever comes. I think that's almost the equivalent of not running a background check. So now everything's in MLS. The world's changed. Everyone's on computers. People make buying decisions or renting decisions online. And so don't be cheap and not get a credit check. Don't be cheap and not stick it in MLS. MLS just casts a much larger net to get your renters. So I've made that mistake in the past of, I just don't want to spend the money on a realtor and then end up sitting empty for a much longer period of time.
Yeah. Now, just curious too, what's your philosophy on application fees? Do you charge them? Do you charge the cost of the background check, or is that sort of a barrier for people applying too?
It's funny because my wife and I, we do all this together, and we've talked about it. She feels really bad that all we charge is our raw costs on the background check. I don't want it to be a profit center. I just don't think that's cool. I think it's bad karma. But I'm almost of the belief that if we pick them, I would be fine with refunding the money back to them because I'm not trying to make money on a background check, just like I'm not trying to keep your deposit.
Right.
I would love nothing more than give you a full deposit and you give me a clean house. That would be a dream scenario. And the same thing on the background check. I'm just trying to cover my costs on that. But I also think it's good that you charge them because that way they got some skin in the game.
Yeah.
You can find out if someone's real. It's kind of like giving a kid a car versus him having some money in it. They tend to not wrap them around a tree as often if they got some money in it.
Very true.
Yeah. So, Tim, as far as like part of your story, and the thing that really kind of attracted me to your story for this podcast was that you and your wife kind of work in tandem on the rentals. So you kind of get the renters in, but then your wife is a real estate agent, and that actually kind of helps you out. Can you explain how that works?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I asked her to be on the podcast. She's like, no way. I mean, and she's beautiful. Instead, you got an ugly guy on it. But she is such a hard worker, and she is just awesome at what she does. But really how we divide up the task is I really love going to look at houses. And I'll look at them first, and she'll come. And ultimately, we make the decision together because we both have to live with it. But she's doing all the in and out, day in, day out of taking care of the renters. She's got a great temperament for it. She can kill you with kindness. But what we do is we try to get, believe it or not, people that want to move out of our houses into our houses. And Steve and Eric, I know that was kind of a little twist that got you to be interested in our story. So here, it takes me a while to figure stuff out. But what ended up happening was finally I just realized that every renter that you have eventually is going to be gone, no matter what.
And not dead. You mean they're going to be out of the rental?
Go ahead.
Out of the rental, not like dead. Yeah.
Well, we've had a couple of those die.
Yeah.
We've had on the lower end stuff. We've had a few of those.
So they were gone. Those ones.
Yeah.
Yes.
So they were gone. Yeah, it's hard to collect. But so what we realized is, hey, our renters are going to leave, and so my wife is now a real estate agent. So we have a little thing we say. Buy from me, tear up your lease for free. So any person renting a house from us at any time during their lease, they can tear up their lease if they buy, not our house, because we don't ever sell anything. But if they buy a house from my wife, they can tear up their lease for free and get out of it at any time. And so this year so far, she's sold 3 of our renters houses. She's made about $62,000 commission from those houses. And so what ends up happening now is we think differently of who we want in the house. Before, a typical landlord thinks, I want someone to move in here, clean, don't tear it up, and be there for a decade. That's how we all probably think. Yeah. Well, the last 2 houses we filled, one couple was from Houston, one couple was from San Francisco. My wife FaceTimed the houses to them, and the point for them picking our house was the fact that they were only planning on renting for a year, and then they wanted to buy something. Well, what's great is both those people didn't know anyone in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and they're thrilled about having our house because they don't feel like they're trapped. Our market, probably a lot like your market, is so hot right now. The chances of you finding your dream home when your lease is up and timing it all right and not living in an extended stay or having a pod full of your stuff somewhere, it's just slim and none. Mm-hmm. So it becomes a real real good relationship with our renters. The fact that they can leave, just buy a house from us. The bad thing is their aunt or their best friend might be a realtor, and we kind of block them because their aunt or their best friend can't get them out of the deal. But now what that ends up doing is it makes us want even more high-end quality rentals. We want to buy even more because we've created this funnel and this business within a business. So the long term of the house is like a 401k or our retirement, but the income that you can make annually is from selling people houses. So it's like a business within a business.
It's genius. I got to say, I love the concept of it. I know I have a personal friend that's just ran into this situation, called me for advice, said, hey, I feel terrible. I'm going to be leaving my lease early, but we moved here on short notice. My wife had a transfer from her job, and we knew we were going to be looking for a house eventually. You have cornered that market. It's brilliant.
It's funny because I got a funny story. So the people that are renting these houses, they typically buy, she sold one guy $1.2 million, another one $800,000. But so we dropped off. We remind our renters on the holiday. So I just got done putting pumpkins and carving kits on the door of everywhere, and with a flyer saying it might be scary trying to time moving out while you're trying to buy a house. And so my wife got a call yesterday. I'm like, I can't believe I'm fixing to go on y'all's podcast, but one of our renters going, thank you so much for the pumpkin. The kids love carving it, and we decided we want to buy a tiny house. And my wife's like, what? Like, we want to buy a land and build like a 400 square foot house. We've been watching HGTV, and that's what we want to do. So even this perfect plan we have has a backfire part of it because, we went out of our lease because we want to buy land and build the world's smallest house on it. So
you know what?
It's kind of funny.
Just stay in touch with those people because like 3 months later, when they want out of the tiny house, you can sell them the next one.
Yeah. I don't know about you guys, but I don't think any woman would want to be in that small of a space with me.
No, it's funny. I just read an article about communities kind of trying to rally against these tiny house movement, saying, hey, it's going to be a fad. This is going to cause problems down the road when, like you said, eventually somebody's going to get burned out and say, I can't live in this tiny house anymore. I'm done with it.
You're going to end up just tapping out, just going, it's like MMA. I just can't handle it anymore.
That is
in a small space.
That is interesting. I wonder if it'll be like when the Olympics come to a city and there's all these buildings they build and then there's like no reason to use them anymore. Like, I guess if you go to Montreal, there's just like these giant buildings or something like that. And same thing with FIFA. So, maybe 20, 30 years from now, there'll just be these little kingdoms of tiny houses that are just decrepit.
Right.
Exactly.
I can see how that would get old, though. I really do. There is sort of this fantasy of like, oh, cool. Imagine the cost you would save, and everything's cheap, and you're just getting the bare essentials. But I just feel like you're dooming everything. I can't imagine marriage lasting very long in that confined space. Oh my God,
I totally agree. But on the seriousness of it, it's worked out great, and our renters communicate better, and I think they feel better just knowing that. All right, if I find my dream house, 3 months or a month before the lease ends, or 3 months into the lease, or whenever it is, I can get out of it. And I don't know if you guys have ever done this and settled for a house that wasn't the right house, but a lot of folks have settled for the house that isn't the right house because they just didn't have time or options. Yeah. And with our program, it allows them both. They've got a ton of options as long as they buy from us, kind of a monopoly there, and they got a ton of time. There's no gun to their head. There's no pressure of trying to find the perfect property in the next week.
Well, it's brilliant too because you're looking for a different type of renter now. You're looking for homeowners. And at the end of the day, every landlord wants their tenants to treat the property with the same respect that they would treat their home. And so now you've got that quality of person in there. And it's effortless because of the deal that you have arranged through this business idea that you have. And it's brilliant. I can't believe we don't see more people doing it because it's real obvious right in your face. And I'm sure there's a lot of situations where people own properties and somebody in the family is selling, and is a realtor. So real interesting.
Well, the other thing I think it does for you is we're all, we all read Kiyosaki. We all know positive cash flow. We all, hey, you want a Porsche, go buy a storage facility, throw yourself enough cash to get it. And Robert Kiyosaki's book, changed my life. And so I love everything about that. I'm all about that. But it's just like a craps table. There's lots of different ways you can play. Somebody might be playing just the numbers. Somebody might be playing that you're going to make the number. Someone might be playing that you're not going to make the number. So with real estate, I think we kind of got to not just go, hey, this is the way it is. You gotta buy a dumpy house, be positive cash flow, and wake up 20 years later and it's paid for. I view it as I want great. Let's just run through the scenario. If we have a very nice house, then we're going to have really good renters, and they're going to pass their credit check that y'all do. And then the next thing we're going to have, because they're quality people, you got a better chance than not that they're going to take care of it, because they weren't raised in a pigsty. They're used to nice things. And then the other thing that you're going to end up having is an area that's going to appreciate, because the nicer areas continue to appreciate. The places with great school districts appreciate. So I'm a firm believer, and we can talk about a little bit more, but appreciation is the key to my investment strategy. So you got appreciation on it. So there's a lot of good things that happen on it. But the other thing about it is those type of people shouldn't be renting. So you're not going to have them for long. And you can either bemoan the fact that, man, we got turnover every year. These people are leaving us. Or, coconut falls off the tree and hits Gilligan in the head like me and go, hey, wait a minute, we could turn this into a profit center. And so it took us a while to figure it out, but you just got to realize what you got. And, I've had Section 8 property, and it's a whole different game when you've got Section 8 apartments, and you got to play that scenario a certain way. And when you have high-end Class A houses, then you play it in an entirely different way. So hopefully that's what I'm bringing to the podcast, just a different way. And I've done the other ways. I just prefer this way at 51 years old.
So you mentioned Section 8. Like, what was your experience with that? I'm assuming that right now you do not have any Section 8 rentals.
I don't. And, my little litmus test on when I had lower end multifamily is if Section 8 could cover the mortgage and then some, then I had no downside. So that was kind of when I bought property, I'm like, if the section, and I did Section 8 and I did traditional renters, but that was kind of, how can I make sure I don't fail? And as long as the Section 8 money would cover the note and then some, then I'm like, okay, this can't be a bad investment. So, but I really think there's a lot of other guests that could speak better than that. I've got a little thing, watch out for the vice and advice. And as far as multifamily, I give myself about a D, just because I did it way far away. I did about 750 miles away, and I did it in an area that had a lot of meth issues. And I'm like anti-crime, anti-drug. So we started screening people if you had a drug history or a crime history. Well, next thing you knew, I ran through 70% of the renters in town because of the standards we had. So it wasn't really a good fit for me. And so there's guys that can speak way better to that than me. And I think where I can help the listeners on the high end stuff.
Yeah. Tim, as far as like somebody who might be listening and like thinking, all right, this strategy could work great, but you're talking about Class A properties and it's pretty expensive. I know from talking with you earlier before we got on the podcast that rental properties and your wife's business isn't the only thing that you do. So how do you cash flow these properties, and what's your strategy behind that?
Okay, so I was like a corporate guy, national account guy in the security industry for forever. And then I finally walked away from that roughly 20 years ago to start a rep firm where I sell security equipment to alarm companies. So I would never sell you guys an alarm, but I would sell to ADT or one of the large companies, motion detectors, fingerprint readers, stuff like that. The great thing about that business is I've got about 35 different lines. So what I like is I transition, just like our listeners have multiple properties, I transition from one check from being a national account guy for Honeywell to 35 checks from all these different manufacturers. And so that got me thinking about revenue streams. And what would happen is one check might be 1,000 one month and 700 the next. And so I started becoming real tolerant of the chop, of the ebb and flow. Whereas when I was a W-2 wage earner, it was pretty much, hey, this was my salary and this was my commission. My commission varied a little bit, but I could kind of bank within about a 10% low or high range of knowing how much I was going to make. But when I started my own business, I really had these ups and downs, a lot like a lot of the listeners' ups and downs of being profitable, and then something happens, a hot water heater. So I become very, very tolerant of chop in money, good, bad, good, bad, good, bad. And so what it made me realize is that maybe my rep firm isn't for real, that it could go away, but it's throwing off decent cash, and I need to put that cash in something that's leveraged that I will own forever. So if I had a product line for 5 years and then all of a sudden, what happens in that business, you do really well and they go, wait a minute, we can get 2 factory guys for what we're paying this guy. So they get rid of the rep. And that's cool. It's just part of the deal. But what it made me realize is I can use that money, put that as 20% down on a good quality house. And then the bank puts 80% and it goes up from there. But if I listen to the realtors I was talking to at the time, like, well, Tim, you're going to be negative $100 a month if you buy over there, or $200 a month. And they were going off of their own, their own influence, their own lifestyle. Mm-hmm. And what that gentleman didn't realize is that I'm up and down on 35 things every single month. So my tolerance for being a little up or a little bit low is probably a lot greater than most. And so, when I talk to people about negative, I'm not encouraging everyone to get negative cash flow. You could really get in a downward spiral. But if someone's willing to put $200, $300, $400, $500 a month into a college fund, then why aren't you willing to be negative $200 every 3 months because something happens on a better property? Mm-hmm. And that's how I look at it. And I know we're talking about making sure that it's not a repeat of another podcast, but there is one analogy that I live by, and it's called the BAD theory, BAD. And what it is you buy the property once, and you're either going to pay above market, at market, or below market. And that occurs once, so you can throw it out the window and you're done. And then we're going to skip A for a second and go to D, debt reduction. The reason why a lot of couples fight and say, let's sell this rent house, I'm sick and tired of it, is debt reduction takes forever. Whether it's on a 15-year note or 30-year note, it's a long, long time. So if you have a today problem, you forget about that slow debt reduction, because the today problem has a rating of about 100, and that debt reduction has a rating of about a 1. So people get frustrated and quit our business. And then we get back to the number one thing I'm looking at, which is A for appreciation. And some people might say it's gambling. I don't think it is. If you buy in the right area, and there's a scarcity of housing, and there's a lot of restrictions in the area, and there's great school districts, people will flock to that area. And so I focus on appreciation. I want to buy in an area that's going to be good 50 years from now, not some area that may go up, may go down. I don't know. And people go, hey, on this appreciation, it's like gambling. But don't we all, when we buy stocks, try to buy the very best stock that'll be around for the next 50 years? Right. But somehow it's gambling if we buy the very best house in the very best school district. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's okay if we do it over here, but you're a crazy man if you do it, in real estate.
Now, you make a great point, and that's a great analogy with the stocks. Do you have a metric system? Is there a way to put numbers to the appreciation? Are you looking into that, or is this more of a principle-based system where you're saying, like you mentioned, the right schools, great area, it's going to appreciate?
There's probably, we were talking earlier about Eric, he can hear every little noise, and I bet he's a way more detail-oriented than you and I, Steve. But my whole thing is I look very long-term, because if you look long-term, if you make a short-term mistake, it's going to be a rounding error. So I buy in areas that are just, rock solid. This one town in Texas called South Lake. It is a top 25 most affluent city in America. They got killer zoning. There's no multifamily. There's no apartments. There's nothing. It's within about 10 minutes of Dallas-Fort Worth Airport. If you think about it, there's only 3 or 4 major cities that are in the middle part of America with airports: Denver, Chicago, Dallas. But of those 3, one of them has pretty much consistently decent weather. So if you're the type of guy that's traveling all over the country, you're going to want to be in the middle part of the country, and you're probably going to want to be in the southern parts. So our population has just been growing like crazy in Texas. That was one of the challenges in my multifamily. I bought in an area that wasn't growing. So if it doesn't grow, it's not going to appreciate typically. So I'm trying to do everything that I possibly can. So, there's cities in Dallas-Fort Worth area that I would not buy in, that I do not think are going to appreciate. But a great appreciating area in a state that's growing, really close to an international airport with zoning that's just tough as nails, without multifamily, I don't see how my rentals can't go up.
Right.
So Tim, I'm curious.
But it took a lot of mistakes to get to that point, I promise.
Right.
Well, I'm kind of curious, kind of piggybacking off of those mistakes. So you had mentioned that was it 19 years and 10 months is when you got your first rental? So
roughly, yeah.
yeah. Well, I was 23 when I got my first rental, and I can't tell you how dumb I was when I got it. I did not have leases for my first tenants. I was just like, yeah, you guys want to live here? That's cool. Like, horrible mistake. Luckily,
Yeah.
it didn't bite me. But so you talked about credit checks and also getting into like higher end properties, which kind of made it easier for you getting a better renter. But like, what things did you learn along the way from starting out so early, renting out rentals?
Typical, no lease. Hey, they're good for it. Just, I always say when you pick the property, you pick the problem. And I hate to use the word problem, so we'll use the word challenge. When you pick the property, you pick the potential challenge.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, and if you're married, you need to make sure your wife and you have the same amount of challenge tolerance. And whoever has the least amount of tolerance is the person that's going to get frustrated with your investment. So if you know that, let's say I'll pick on me. Let's say my wife has tolerance for day and I'm very low tolerant, and then I buy a cheap property, then I'm the one that's going to get frustrated and say, let's get rid of it. I'm done with it. Tap out. I've had it. So I think when you buy a property, you need to think about you and your significant other. What are y'all like? Are you the type of people that can put up with anything and all we care about is positive cash flow? Great. Go buy something down and dirty and crank out that positive cash flow and you're good. But if you're like a doctor and an attorney and then you're going to buy a 24-unit apartment complex that has all kinds of problems,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to sell it. You're going to sell it quick. You're probably going to sell it for a loss, and you're just going to tap out and be done with it. So I just like where we're at as far as the hiring stuff, and quite honestly, the appreciation aspect. I mean, we all learned in Rich Dad Poor Dad, good debt versus bad debt. Well, if you've got some real estate that's appreciating, that's some really, really good debt. I mean, because you've already got good debt because someone else is paying down the mortgage, but now it's appreciating. So you want as much of that good debt as you possibly can get. And it just took me a while to get to that point, and that's where I'm at. And I like the higher end stuff. It appreciates so much more.
I love the term challenge tolerance. That is that is perfect. And it's so funny. I just feel like a lot of people don't think of it in those terms. I'm thinking of it personally. I could think of a lot of situations where, yeah, maybe my wife would handle that better. Maybe I would handle that better. But I feel like landlords or real estate investors need to really consider that. And that is just a perfect point to really determine maybe the type of rentals you should be getting into.
Well, with this silver hair, you learned a few things, but every house I buy now, I literally think I'm keeping it forever. I'm keeping it for my lifetime. I'm keeping it to pass to my kids and then my grandchildren eventually. And so when you look at that type of horizon, you're not going to buy something marginal. And I just think that the marginal stuff, I mean, we've all driven to neighborhoods that are just run down, and we've all been in areas that are super affluent and that are nice. I just, I think Beverly Hills has been nice for 100 years. And I think there's some areas that, maybe pick on California, maybe Watts has been really bad for 70 years. I just, when you think about forever, you just tend to buy better quality stuff because it is forever. And the thing that I kind of go back and forth with different philosophies. And like I said before we started recording, I appreciate anyone that's rental real estate strategy. I can see from their side and I appreciate it. But if you're positive cash flow, you're paying taxes on that money. But if you have appreciation property and you refinance, it's tax free. So I argue that if you have good properties that are appreciating, all your money is tax free. Whereas if you have something that's positive, you're paying taxes on it. Now, don't get me wrong. My stuff's positive now because I've had it for so long. But if someone is on the fence right now today listening to this going, I'm going to buy a marginal house or I'm going to buy a really good house, just know that marginal house, you might be $100 positive, but that outstanding house, $100 a month positive times 12 months is $1,200. But if that outstanding house ends up appreciating $5,000 or $10,000, then didn't you just make 3 to 7 times more money on your deal? And also, when you access that money, is tax-free versus taxable. So it's just a different way of looking at it. Because I think we're just getting beaten over the head with positive day one, positive. I think people are making some poor quality rental choices based upon that. And then when you compound on our deal, buy from me, tear up your lease for free, it adds another revenue stream. And if I was at a lower end property level, those people might be serial renters and they might never buy. So that would eliminate that strategy on the lower end stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just so much good information for people to kind of consider. I'm thinking about my own rental property because I know I've told Steve before, maybe I'm challenge tolerant or intolerant of challenges. Because sometimes like I get stuff that happen to my property, I'm like, I should just sell it. I'm done with this.
Eric finds a cigarette butt over by the garage. He's like, oh, I've had it. This is crazy.
That's true.
Yeah. Hey, it's easy to do. I was listening to Nick Saban the other day. He was talking about he goes, it's normal to just survive. He goes, a human being, our normal thing is just to survive. It's not to kill it or just really excel. Our normal thing is to just survive. And so he's saying, hey, everyone's telling my players how great they are every single day. He goes, what do you think that does to their head? And then I got to walk in there and tell them that they're not that great and they got to earn it every day. And so if you think about that same strategy with rentals, it's so easy to quit. It's so easy to see a cigarette butt and say, forget it, or hot water heater, someone trashes your house. It's so easy to quit. And that's surviving. But the exceptional thing is building wealth in real estate. And it's not easy and it takes some time. But I'm here to tell you, it's a lot more tolerant and easier when you deal with a better caliber of renter and a better caliber of houses. I'm an open book. I just want to share some numbers. So last year in South Lake, we have $5 million worth of real estate, and it went up 20%. I'm not saying that to brag because Roger Goodell makes $50 million a year, so who cares, right? Yeah. And he's doing.
You're less hated than he is, though.
Yeah, currently, but I am in Dallas, so I'm going to throw my jabs. But think about that. $5 million worth of good debt real estate that just appreciated 20%. That's $1 million. I mean, 98% of Americans will never have a net worth of $1 million, and that's 1 year passively. Now, it took a lot of dumb mistakes and a lot of stuff to get that way, but man, let's dumb it down on a smaller scale. Let's say somebody buys a $200,000 house instead of an $80,000 house. And let's just say that it goes up 10%. You made 20 grand and maybe the $80,000 house went backwards or didn't go up. So that's what you got to think about is what has a better chance of appreciating, because that appreciation is really what's going to change your life versus the $100 here, $100 there. But I do understand, we spoke before we got on the recording, is you got to start somewhere, and I get it. And my first house was a $45,000 2-bedroom 1-bath house. I understand, but if you and your wife have the ability to have a better house, focus on where will it be, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years down the road, and give yourself, just like a stock pick, the best chance to do well long term.
Okay, well, what would you say as far as because you're talking about you and your wife, and do you have any tips for a listener if they're like, oh, man, my wife or my husband would never go for this? Like, what kind of advice would you give them? Or maybe you don't like the word advice. What kind of tips would you give them?
No, I like the word advice. My joke is there's a lot of vice in advice. So everyone's got an opinion. Doesn't mean that it might be accurate. And mine might not be accurate on this either. But here's what I did. I mean, I keep referencing it, but happy wife, happy life. I mean, you got to make sure that you guys are on the same page. I mean, it's tough enough to be successful in life when the person that's sleeping in the bed next to you is against you. You know what I mean? So my wife and I just wrote a book, and it's being edited, and it's called My Wife Hates, which slashed out in a heart with a Cupid stick, whatever you call that thing, and then it says loves rental houses. And what it is 15 chapters of me like a guy writing about the business aspect. And at the end of every chapter, my wife writes about the female perspective on that. And what gave me that idea is it's like a plug for Kiyosaki today, so I'm sorry if there's people that don't like Kiyosaki, but I read every Kiyosaki book he had, and then I was out of them. And so I'm like, well, there's one more. It's pink, it's Kim's, or purple or something. It's Kim Kiyosaki's book. So I read her book, and I'm so happy I did, because it allowed me to realize all the fear and security and all the things that a woman goes through in an investing decision. And so I'm like, I started handing those books out to every woman that I knew, because I thought it was a really neat deal. So when we came up with this idea, I thought, wouldn't it be neat in one book to have the guy's perspective and the girl's perspective? So if the girl's gung-ho on getting real estate, she can go, look, aha, this is the deal. Or if the guy's gung-ho, he can go, honey, here's her perspective on it. So in one book, I got a feeling it's going to be tossed back and forth for the person. But in that book, I really talk about you gotta be in tune and together, and this can be a really great wealth building thing if you do it properly.
Right. Well, Steve, I don't know how you feel about it, but maybe we can have Tim inside of our Facebook group, and when that book does launch, we can let everyone know about it in the group too.
For sure, yeah, I love the concept there of having both perspectives.
And here's the thing: I'm plugging a book, so all the money's going to Safe Haven, which is a women's shelter in Fort Worth, Texas. So it's not like, hey, I'm on your podcast. I'm trying to. This guy's not rich enough. He needs my $10 from the book. So I believe books are there to help people, and any proceeds you make from those books are to go to help more people.
Love it. And one last question for you on the type of properties you're picking up. So this was a question I had, and I meant to ask it earlier. If you're looking at a house, do you look at the house from the perspective of this is a house I would buy to move my family into? Or do these homes that you're purchasing have certain characteristics that would be good for somebody who's just moving in for a year at a time?
Great question. So whenever we buy a house, I always think if our world came crashing down, would we feel safe and would we be happy about being here? And that's kind of a litmus test on buying a house. If we would be happy to, fortunately life is good and things are great and I love where we live, but if things took a major negative turn, would I be happy living here? And that's, if it's a no, then we won't buy it. And so that would probably help a lot of people avoid buying, problem properties. If you're not willing to live in there, then you can probably think you're going to have a lower caliber person, and you might have challenges that you're not challenge tolerant to.
Right.
If that's the word.
Yeah, I love it. It's awesome.
It's just a wealth of knowledge here, Tim. We're just so happy you could be on the podcast with us today. We thank you for your time, and we'll send you an invite to the Facebook group. Maybe people will be able to connect with you in there if you want, and we'll definitely tell them about that book when it comes out, because it sounds like a pretty cool project, and definitely interesting for anybody who's going through real estate as a couple and kind of wondering what the other person's seeing. That could be an interesting read for them.
Sure. I've got a couple other things. This book is 50 Things They Didn't Teach You in School, and this is, there you go. 50 Things They Didn't Teach You in School. All the proceeds go to the food bank here in Keller, Texas, but it's stuff like buy used cars. There's a chapter talking about leverage in real estate. One chapter is if you buy 5 rent houses, you're set for life. Mm-hmm. So it's on Amazon. And then also I've got a poster that's free, 25 Habits of a Future Millionaire. It's talking about being charitable, leverage, things like that. And all that can be found at timshiner.com, Tim Shiner like a black eye.com. And I really appreciate you guys having me on. But to plug you guys, I love the fact that on your website you talk about being charitable. I think that's huge. I think the wealthiest people I know are also the most charitable people. So that's huge. And I know it's self-serving for you guys, but do background checks. It's there. It's just a matter if you want to be blind and not look at it and move them in your house, or avoid having them in your house. So I think it's incredibly important. We would not lease to anybody without doing a check on them.
Awesome.
I think that's
sage advice. Yeah. Sage advice. Yeah.
That's like the perfect outro for this episode. And do background checks.
Yeah.
Cha-ching, cha-ching. No, it really is the right thing, and I believe that. I wouldn't say it if we didn't live it. So, guys, thanks for having me on, and good luck with that quarterback switch up in Buffalo.
Yeah. We're always looking. We're not like you. Like I wanted Dak Prescott too. I really did at the draft. I think they were going to go for him the next round, and we lost out. So.
Hey, first of all, I think it's nice that Buffalo people and Texas people can talk between the hockey and the football history that we have.
I know,
but more importantly, I think everyone would agree. We got our handful with our owner down here. In all of our sports. So, so thanks for having us on. I appreciate it, guys.
Thanks, Tim.